Good evening and welcome to tonight's TI Technology webinar hosted by Texas Instruments, where tonight we're going to take a look at mathematical modeling and quantitative reasoning with TI-Nspire technology. I see that many of you are joining us for the first time, so we'd like to offer a special welcome if this is your first T-Cubed Professional Development webinar. We'd also like to thank everyone for completing the live survey on the right side of your screen. My name is Mike Houston, and I'm the moderator for this event. I teach algebra and calculus near Pittsburgh, where I use TI technology to make tough-to-teach, tough-to-learn concepts accessible to all my students. I'm really excited to introduce our two panelists tonight, Steve Phelps and Johnny Ashurst. Steve is a longtime geometry teacher who currently teaches AP Statistics and Computer Science, and Steve is a T-Cubed regional instructor and co-author of the AQR textbook. Steve, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Mike. I'm excited to be here tonight. Thanks for asking us.
And Johnny has served as a school district mathematics consultant and as a high school mathematics instructor whose presentations promote modeling of everyday events while using an interactive classroom management style that empowers students to confidently and competently problem solve. He is a national instructor with Teachers Teaching with Technology, an independent consultant with Win Learning, an instructor for AQR Press, and a ModSpar instructor with the Advanced Teacher Capacity Initiative at Ohio University. Thanks for being with us, Johnny. We're expecting a large crowd tonight, so your audio is automatically muted. Please feel free to send any questions for Steve or Johnny in the Q&A window, which is located on the right side of your screen. I know that Steve and Johnny are also going to be engaging you tonight and asking you to respond to some of their questions in the chat. We don't expect you to have any audio issues tonight, but in the event that you do, try selecting Communicate in the WebEx menu, choose Audio Broadcast, and then click Join. At this point, Steve is going to discuss our agenda.
Hi, everyone. So we will talk about tonight modeling with mathematics versus mathematical modeling. I think we probably all have done application problems. We're going to explore how mathematical modeling is different from just a typical application problem. Towards the end, we may briefly give a shout out to the Moody Mega Math Challenge, which is a high school modeling contest. And then we will, of course, engage in Johnny's had bad luck recently, so he's got this medicine problem that he's going to share with us. Also at the end, we'll talk about some free online resources. And stay till the very end, because the big webinar giveaway is a complimentary registration for the 2016 T-Cubed International Conference in Orlando, Florida. So stay till the end, please.
Thanks, Steve. And Johnny is going to discuss our expected outcomes.
Yes. Tonight, in addition to modeling, we're going to focus on leading our modeling process to something called linear difference equations, which is looks similar to a linear equation, but from a recursive standpoint. And while we're doing that, we're going to use the mathematics to engage folks with the technology. And you might say that the technology is going to drive the thinking, tie together the things that we otherwise would not do. So we're looking forward to giving a good example of how the technology and the pedagogy fits with our use of everyday problem with mathematics.
Thanks so much, Johnny. Steve, it's all yours.
All right, thanks, Mike. Oh, I like when that happens. So let's talk a little bit about mathematical modeling and quantitative reasoning with the TI-Nspire technology. A couple of things first. So a couple of introductory slides to kind of get you in the right frame of mind. There are mathematical application problems, and then there are mathematical modeling problems. And I think there's a difference. Mathematical application problems, they may typically be real world, but they're already kind of stated in clear mathematical terms. I'm sure you can think of some application problems maybe in your textbooks at school. Students tend to make few, if any, decisions about how to interpret the context because the context is already pretty much laid out for them. The mathematics used is generally the mathematics that you're doing right now at the present time. So it's very focused and limited, typically because of the way the problem's been stated. And one of the things about mathematical application problems is there's typically a right answer. You know, how long is the ball in the air? How long does it take for the ball to clear a fence? Things like that. So those would be your typical mathematical application problems. Contrast those to mathematical modeling problems. These too are often real world, but they're not stated in clear mathematical terms. The students often need to make decisions about how to formulate the problem so that they can actually start to approach it in the right way. Students end up asking a lot of different questions themselves, formulating questions and making assumptions, oftentimes simplifying assumptions to help them tackle the problem. Students often, at the end, they'll need to perhaps revisit the problem or revise their assumptions throughout the process. Students also develop their own mathematical approaches to solving them, so it's not, contrast that with the mathematical application problem where the content is, or the mathematics is kind of laid out for them. And students also decide if whatever they're doing, solving that real-world modeling problem, if it actually kind of improves their understanding of it, they may need to revise it. They revise how they're approaching the problem or their models for the problem. So there are some differences, and we're going to do our best tonight to try to go through these five steps of this mathematical modeling process. And in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide is a link for reference that's to the Moody's Mega Math Challenge, which is a high school modeling contest. So the five-step, and I'll use steps loosely, the five-step modeling process is we define the problem, make assumptions, and identify the variables that we'll need. Then, of course, we create and solve the model. And then we analyze, assess, and iterate. So in other words, we reflect kind of on our model. We see how well our model does what we expect it to do. And then we may need to go back through this process again and try to maybe refine our model. And then, of course, at the end, we often report out and implement our modeling experiences. So we will do our best to try to engage everyone in these five processes. Through webinar, it might be challenging to get all of them done, but we will certainly do our best. Tonight, our mathematical modeling tool of choice will be the list and spreadsheet page. So if you're trying to follow along, having a list and spreadsheet page on your handheld or on your software might be a good way to go. This is what we like to use, especially for the problems that we're going to be doing tonight that are kind of recursive in nature. The thing about lists and spreadsheet, I was at a committee meeting a couple weeks ago on modeling, and this is a quote from Landy Godbold. Many of you may know him. He's a T-Cubed instructor for TI. This was his quote about modeling, and what struck me is the highlighted, the yellow and the bold, and I think this kind of really captured the essence of a spreadsheet in modeling. The spreadsheet, I think it lets you play what if by varying parameters, and oftentimes being able to do that can take the place of a lot of physical experimentation, which would actually be kind of tough. And so what happens is in the spreadsheet, modeling kind of takes you from a single answer to a whole kind of world of answers just by changing these parameters. So this is certainly one of the reasons we like to use spreadsheets in our modeling activities. And so with that, we'll get Johnny to share the scenario with us, and poor Johnny. Poor Johnny.
Tragic, no doubt it's tragic. Idea when you're riding a bike, now this is not a motorcycle, this is with pedals, and I'm an amateur cyclist to say the best. But one of the strategies is to stay on the bike. Well, recently I had an experience where I had the view of going over the handlebars of the bike. So small accident, and resulted in making a choice to visit my doctor. When I left there, he did give me a little chuckle. He laughed about the whole thing, and but he also gave me a prescription. And there's the scenario. Well, I have a question for you. And as you see the screen, it's your turn. Identify the problem. So I've had a bike accident. Gone to the doctor. He gives me a prescription. So what questions would you might likely ask at this point? We're going to ask you to do this differently. Take a minute of thinking time. Type your answer in the chat window, but don't touch the enter key to submit your answer just yet. The next screen will give you a start time on entering. So we'll give you just a moment. Okay, as you see on the screen, press enter. Let's see what you've done. Questions, what type of drug? Was it prescription medication or something that's over the counter? How long does it last? What is it and how much? These are cool questions. These are the things that you would expect to come up. Well, thanks. I will be feeling better soon. So, and how much is the bill? That's a definitely that's a biggie. With all the things that we have posed here, with these various questions, let's look at let's agree on a few things. And in a class, we would take time for students in groups to come up with a variety of questions, just as you have here. No boundary on those questions, and some of those will be absolutely off the wall. It'll be what kind of bike do you have, and where were you riding, and whatever they say, I accept that initially. But eventually we're going to narrow things down to the essence, and what we have right now, if we can agree on that, is that we have prescribed a 30 milligram tablet, and that I should take a dose every 8 hours. The medicine dissipates, 60% of it will dissipate every 8 hours, and that's something that's not on the label, but since the pharmacist is one of my former students and who knows that I like to ask those questions, she gave me that information. And the prescription will last for 10 days. Okay, with that in mind, I'm going to ask you to use the chat one more time, and let's identify what you might suspect your students or you yourself would suggest or identify as the essential problem. So we're going to give you just a moment to do that, and once again, don't submit your answer. Just go ahead and start typing. We'll give you just a moment to think, and we'll pause, and then we'll submit together. submit your answers.
Those are some good questions, Johnny. Chances of an overdose. Skipping a dose. Oh, these are great questions.
Half-life. I am impressed. It sounds like I'm not the only person who's had a bike accident. With those questions, or with those essential questions, is there some way what we would do with our students is to eventually, I would do one of two things. Each group would come up with their group essential question, and that's what they would investigate. But for the purpose of tonight's activity, we're going to choose a single essential question. And that, in this case, will be, how much medicine is in my bloodstream at any time after the initial dose? So that's, in our modeling process, we've gone from the situation, and one of the things that's pretty common for us in modeling is that I did not pose, as Steve said initially, I gave no question. I gave a situation. Students posed comments. From those, we have now identified a problem that we'll explore.
So, Johnny, is it fair to say that, I mean, any of those questions could have been a modeling question in and of themselves? Is that, would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And with students in small groups, there are times that each group will identify their own essential question, and that's the one that they will model. So everything that we saw there that were samples are equally acceptable for us to launch, and we just happen to choose this one. Good point. Thanks, Steve.
I think there's a lot of questions that will probably, there are questions stated in the chat, which I think will also be useful on the next slide. So there you go, Johnny.
Okay. So let's, I'll give you a chance to look at what's on the screen. We're identifying some assumptions and variables. How much medicine do I have at the time of the initial dose? Well, it's a 30-milligram tablet. I intend to take it every 8 hours. And I am one of those people who probably doesn't do it every 8 hours. I might take morning, afternoon, bedtime. I have a relative who would set a clock, wake up regardless, and do literally every 8 hours. So let's look at the chat window one more time. And what assumptions do we need to make here? What assumptions should we make regarding this problem, and what variables should we identify? So we're going to put both of those in the next chat. And once again, I'm going to ask you to take just a moment to read those two questions.
Now, Johnny, by assumptions, these should be assumptions that maybe would help simplify things, because this could be a pretty complex problem. So will our assumptions maybe make things kind of easier to work with, you think?
Yes, it would. For example, I'll give an example. Is this a time-release tablet? And so I will say this is a tried-and-true old medication where it's not time-released, and that's, as you said, something that simplifies our thinking.
Got it.
Okay.
Ready?
And I'll give you a chance. Let's press enter. Let's see what you have. The routine remains constant. Johnny takes the medicine at 8 hours around the clock.
Oh, this is on time. That's a Johnny to do that. That would be something else.
Yes. Yeah. I need someone to guide me. Is the medication time released? Again, perfect example of something that we would discuss and do some simplification. We want to simplify because we want to get down to a very simplified core problem, and as we move along after that, we have all kinds of opportunities to come back and explore when students suggest, well, what if it had been this or that?
Guys, great responses in the chat.
Okay, let's try one more step. So with, again, in our class, we would have had a good discussion between that screen and now, and to me it's much like a cooking show. We've been doing some mixing, and we put the contents in the oven, and 45 minutes later it comes out and it looks like what you see on the screen. We're going to decide and agree on these assumptions that the medication does dissipate every 8 hours, 60% of it will. And our variables are going to be time, the amount of medication that I have in my body at a given time, the initial dose and the size of each tablet being the same, 30 milligrams, and the dissipation rate. So those are the variables, and we have set parameters for those. Okay. So Steve, would you take us through creating a spreadsheet that might get someone, and before we start that, we're probably thinking of a global problem right now, and one of the things we might suggest to students is solve a simpler problem. So that's what we're going to approach right now with the setup of the spreadsheet. Steve? So
you see the spreadsheet on your screen where I've got hours is going 0, 8, 16, 24. And the question is, how much medicine would be in Johnny's blood after 1 day? So think about that for a moment. And again, let me see. Think about that for a moment, and then let's maybe put an answer in the chat, but don't press enter. But think about that for a second. If he takes a 30 milligram dose at hour equals 0, and then takes and it loses 60% every 8 hours, and he takes another 30 milligram dose, how much will be in his blood at 24 hours?
Hey, Steve?
Yeah.
Maggie just had a quick question. She was wondering if you could talk about the equal sign sequence command for a minute.
I will, Maggie. I will. So in the so what I've done is in the hours column, I wanted to create a sequence of numbers, an arithmetic sequence that went 0, 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. I could have done this a number of different ways, but the sequence command is what I'm using. And I guess 8 times A would be my formula that I'm going to use to generate my sequence. Then the comma A, this A right here, is I would call that a dummy variable, or like my index variable. And A is going to range from 0 to 30. So the first time through the sequence, A will be 0, which generates 0 in the first cell. And then A will be 1, which would generate 8. And then A is 2, which would generate 16. And so there's actually going to be 30 numbers in this list. And 30 numbers because Johnny was going to take the medicine for 10 days. You're welcome. You are welcome. So if you thought about how much medicine will be in Johnny's blood, if you want to go ahead and put that in the chat window, if you thought about it, and if not, we're going to work together and try to generate this, the sequence. Ooh. I will be using the TI spreadsheet, but I know that there are some schools that may use like a Google Sheet or Excel that would all work the same way. I think the spreadsheet is so valuable on the Nspire because it behaves just like an Excel spreadsheet.
And we had a good question, Steve. Once again, going back to sequence and where is the sequence command found? There are a couple of ways to do that. Once you're familiar with that, you'd be able to type SEQ, and you would move from italics to a font that identifies this as a function. However, if you didn't know that, then it is a menu command. And it can also be found by using the catalog, which is a couple of keys just below menu. And Steve, you might want to say some more about that.
So I on the handheld, I click on my catalog button, which is that button right there. And then if I click on the S button, that kind of jumps down to the S's. And if I toggle down a little bit more, there's the sequence command. And it gives you a little cheat sheet or a little help window right here at the bottom. So the expression, your dummy variable, the low and the high. And I could have gone by a step as well. So.
Perfect. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like Greg has an interesting response, which was non-numeric. I like that.
So on the spreadsheet, so I've got to name each of my columns first. So I think I might have said hours, but I just clicked hour and was left off the S. So I think that'll be okay. And this will be the amount of blood or amount of medicine in the blood. And as I said, I use the sequence command. And instead of looking up here in the top, if you'd like to look down here in the bottom, you can see how the sequence command works. So it's the sequence command, and it's 8 times A. And I could use any variable. I didn't have to use A. I'm just using A because that's the most convenient variable for me. A is my dummy variable, and it will go from 0 to 30. And so that generates, should go all the way to 240 hours, which would be 10 days. Now for the amount, there were 30 milligrams in the initial dose. And then according to our assumptions about the model, that he was going to, the medicine was going to dissipate 60% abruptly every 8 hours, and then he would take a dose. So if I lose 60% of the 30 milligrams, I'm left with 40%. So in this cell, I'm going to type in 0.4 times. Now, since I'm in a spreadsheet, I want to make sure I'm referring to the cells that are containing the numbers I want to manipulate. So I'm going to refer to cell B1 because that has my initial dose. And then every 8 hours, I'm going to add on or take another 30 milligram dose. So at my after 8 hours, after I lose 60% of my original medicine abruptly and take another 30 milligram dose, I now have 42 milligrams of blood or of medicine in my blood. And what I'll do is I'll fill this down. And after 24 hours, now the 24th hour also includes a dose. So if I click on this cell, you'll see there's also a dose factored in. So there's just under 49 milligrams of medicine in the blood. And if I could fill this down the rest of the way, it's always kind of hard to control. It seems like the medicine, the amount of medicine in the blood is leveling off at right around 50. Now, Johnny, I couldn't see the chat window, or is there anything in the chat that I should be aware of, or is there anything else that you think I should mention about this before we go back to the slides?
From a technical standpoint, while we look through that, would you, for those of us who don't know how to use the field command, that may be of interest. And Mike, while he's doing that, would you also look at the chat for anything that is that I've overlooked?
So let me go ahead and delete this column, and I will type in amount again. I did not want to do that. That was a teacher technique. That's what that was. Let me call this an AA mount. And so what I'd like to do is I want to use the fill command. I'll switch to the handheld view. And so what I'd like to do is I'll put in 30 milligrams, and in this cell I will go equals 0.4 times cell B1 plus 30. And then my students, they will toggle back up, and I want to fill this cell down. And so I always go to my menu, and this is something probably under, it's kind of a data thing. So this is probably something under my, because I'm wanting to extend my data. And sure enough, if I press 3 and then the third option there is a fill command. And notice what happens is kind of like a little dashed box or a dashed line. So I can kind of fill that up or down, or I could actually go left or right if I wanted to. And after I toggle down as far as I can go, I can press Enter, and it will fill my spreadsheet in for me.
Hey,
Is that what you're looking for, Johnny?
Absolutely. Perfect. Mike?
Steve, Stacy had a question. She said, so because 60% is gone, you're asking what's left, and that's why you're using the 40%?
Correct. That is correct. And I could have gone like a, for example, I guess I could have done it in a way like a compound interest formula, where you might have gone, for example, 1 minus 0.6 times what's in cell B1 plus 30. So I could have done the same thing that way. This is one of the reasons I love the spreadsheet. I love the spreadsheet because oftentimes, like some of my students I have in my statistics class are weaker seniors, and their algebra skills they're good math students, but their algebra skills are a little weak. And this just helps reinforce all these old algebra skills, and they get used to using functions and variables, and there's a great deal of pride when they create their own spreadsheet. There really, really is. The spreadsheet is, I just think, it's just an underutilized tool. Love the spreadsheet. Did I tell you how much I like the spreadsheet? Johnny, is there anything else I should do there, dude?
No, not at that point, unless there's something that I've missed in the chat. So with what we have here, there's a word that Steve's used a couple of times, abruptly. Abruptly. So how likely is it that that medication was abruptly, that 60% was suddenly? So that's something we're going to explore just in a moment. But if you take the spreadsheet that we had just a moment ago and look at that in a graphical format, my goodness. Another word comes to mind, the word converge, limit. You probably have some other thoughts for that. Anything in this graph? Yes, go ahead. Anything that you might type in the chat that's either mathematically a connection or anything that's visually or numerically surprising for you, or even simply about the real-world problem.
I don't know what
and with this one, no reason to wait. Go ahead and supply your answer in the chat.
Stabilize.
So asymptotes, stabilize, and the question again, Stacy, is there anything that you see that's unexpected? And I'm going to go ahead and give away one of my answers. Many times students are surprised at the stabilization here, the equilibrium, that the amount of medication we're losing is replaced by the amount that we're adding, and we get a stable, which takes us very much back to the real-world problem, where we go back to the pharmacist and the doctor, and it might answer a lot of questions of why we get this information or this particular dose of medication in this time frame, so that and the pharmacist, if he or she visited the classroom, would state that in order for that medication to be effective, we need to have a particular amount, or at least in a window of min and max, so that it will do its job properly as designed. Were there other comments in the chat?
I think Stacy brought up an interesting a comment, is that there's now seems to be 50 milligrams of medicine in the bloodstream when the initial dose was actually 30. And even though we were losing a little bit of medicine every 8 hours, we bumped up with a 30 milligram dose. It just seemed to kind of level off. Well, that's also based on our assumptions that we made some very a lot of simplifying assumptions for this model. So we'll maybe look, if we have time, to explore some of those differences.
And Steve, one of the things we initially discussed was something called a linear difference equation.
Ooh, this, Johnny?
Yes. Yes, it looks very much like the typical y equals mx plus b, something from an Algebra 1 class, a linear function. So can we talk about that?
So let me go back to the spreadsheet for just a moment here, and let me click on a cell B2. And if you look down here at the bottom of the screen, notice that that seems to kind of look like a slope-intercept form equation, where 0.4 is your slope and 30 is your y-intercept, and B1 seems to be taking the place of the variable x. But so this would be a linear difference equation. It's almost like a linear equation, but it's recursive in nature, because it seems that cell B1 is referring to a value that happened in the cell before. And if I go to B3, that's referring to cell B2. And likewise, each cell has the same form of a linear equation, but it seems to be referring recursively to the value immediately before it. So in our spreadsheet, the linear difference equation, it looks linear, but it's recursive, and the linear difference equation is perfect for a spreadsheet. Have I told you guys how much I like a spreadsheet? So, nice. And the great questions in the chat. I'm kind of looking back and forth at both. So, so let's go back here and let's Johnny, you want to, or just me, Johnny?
Okay. So let's go back to, and I want to mention something in the chat. And I've overlooked it. I think it was a few questions back. Mike, was there anything there that you saw that we should address at this time?
No, not yet. I think there's a lot of, again, great comments there in the chat window, but so far, so good.
Well, there are many questions that have been posed in the last couple of minutes that extend where we are. And going back to Landy's comment that we have a host of answers, one of the things that I did see is that eventually I'm going to stop taking this medication, and how much will be in my system on day 11 or day 12 and so on of that nature. I find that to be something that students are always interested in, because I think they think of other possibilities, whether it be aspirin or a medication that has been prescribed to them, whatever the case might be. And there are other comments that I saw where someone mentioned a doctor's input. Those are, for each of us, the amount of knowledge that we bring to this activity when we're modeling in our own classroom. I think that would be very individual. So let's look at a couple of what-ifs. What if we change the dosage amount? What if we double it? What if we cut it in half? How would that affect? That's further investigation. What if we change the rate of dissipation? Again, double, perhaps not double in this case, but cut it in half, cut it by 10%. If we change the frequency of the dosage, things of that nature. So we're on the threshold of finding not an answer, but a multitude of answers. And let's move to
So there is a file that you'll be able to download along, I think, with our PowerPoint and a TNF file, where you can actually manipulate and explore those questions. So what happens if you change the dissipation rate? What happens if you change the dose? What happens if you change the frequency? But this is one of the beautiful things of the spreadsheet. If I can go back to my spreadsheet for just a moment, I could easily go back to this cell B2, and instead of a 60% dissipation rate, if there was a 70% dissipation rate, that would leave me with 30% left. And then I could fill this down. And now I can see it seems to be leveling off at about 42 milligrams, which kind of begs the question, I wonder, is there a dissipation rate where I will always stay at 30 milligrams? Ooh. But the spreadsheet, I think, makes exploring the parameters so easy to do. So if I want to change my dosage, I could simply maybe make my dosage 40, and then in this cell, change the plus 30 to 40, and then simply fill that down further. Uh-oh, but not that far. And so now I've got a new dissipation rate, and I have a new dosage amount, and it allows me to go from a single answer to, as Landy put it, to a world of answers. And it really is, at least for my weaker math students, this is a very empowering tool, this spreadsheet. Johnny, I love spreadsheets. Have I told you, Johnny, how much I love spreadsheets?
It's a rumor. It's simply a rumor.
It's a rumor. So,
go ahead. Continue.
You're okay. You're up, man. Go ahead.
No, what I had in mind here is the next steps.
Yes.
What might someone else's next step be? And what would you do next? I've hinted at, because of the use of the word abruptly, how would that affect things? What if that wasn't, and how likely is it that we lose that 60% just suddenly? Chat? Response? Oh, John said we might set up cells differently. I agree with Maggie. It's not very likely that that's going to happen. Maybe in a Roadrunner cartoon. And we're looking at the chat and some absolutely fabulous alternatives there. And for me, I'm telling you, this is not an individual problem per se. It is a real-world situation where we are not bounded by finding an answer, but each exploration provides the opportunity for further exploration if we so choose, or individual exploration. Steve, I wonder if we could talk about the dissipation rate as something that's not so sudden.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat, and those are the questions that came up. I know that one about the dissipation rate. Ray mentioned sliders for the initial dose, rate of decay, period of redose. That will be a TNF file that I'm sure Michael will tell you how to download. And setting, David mentioned setting the spreadsheet up by the hour or by 15-minute intervals. That's also in an Nspire file. So is there any?
And while we've kept things simple, I did notice just a few chat comments earlier. Someone mentioned my body weight, my size, factors that that in further exploration are valuable. And in our simplified model, I am a one-size-fits-all person.
So I think this is the point where I think mathematical application problems, which we discussed right at the beginning of this presentation tonight, and mathematical modeling problems, I think you're kind of seeing where these things are starting to diverge. I mean, you could have had a classroom full of different questions, but I think in a mathematical application problem, kids would be done. They figured out how much medicine Johnny had in his bloodstream at the end of a day, and done. But what we're looking at is how can we change our model, make our model more flexible, make it maybe predict better. So, so by analyzing, assessing, and iterating, we talked about changing the dosage amount, changing the rate of dissipation, and changing the frequency of the dosage. But what if we change the rate, or what if the, this is not worded properly, what if the rate of dissipation is continuous? And I'm thinking more along, instead of being abruptly computed at every 8 hours or at every dosage, what if it's kind of continuous, like you lose a fraction, almost like a compound interest formula? And then, of course, this next one is getting to a calculus question. What if we shortened our time intervals? And I'll briefly explore what happens with you. We're just not going to have time to go over it on a spreadsheet, but again, you can download these things as well. So here's an example where the dissipation rate is we shorten our time intervals. Instead of looking at it every 8 hours, we look at the time interval every hour. Yet we still take a dosage every 8 hours. And so I approach this as a compound interest formula in a way. And if you would lose 60% in 8 hours, I would assume that you would lose 60 divided by 8 or 7.5% per hour. So by shortening up my time intervals and exploring the difference, I kind of get sort of an oscillating pattern that seems to go between 65 milligrams and maybe 37-ish milligrams. But somewhere in the middle is probably 52.5. And then if we looked at, instead of an hour interval, if we looked at half-hour intervals, but we still took a dosage every 8 hours, we would lose about, instead of losing 60% of the medicine every 8 hours, we would lose about 3.75% per half hour. And so once again, we're getting this oscillating behavior, and where it seems like I spike up when I take a dosage and then kind of gradually and gracefully lose my medication. And then what happens if we explore per minute? So if we shorten our time interval per minute, but I'm still taking a dosage every 8 hours, I would only lose about 0.125% per minute. And I've kind of got this type of a graph where at 8 hours I spike up, and then I seem to lose medicine in this nice graceful curve. I wonder what type of a curve that is. Spike up again, and again lose more. So I really wish that we could certainly go into more details of those graphs with you on the Nspire, but again, you'll be able to download these and explore them at your leisure. And of course, Johnny and I are always available for questions, and so is Mike as well. But what we tried to do tonight with everyone is to walk you through this mathematical modeling process and hopefully illustrate the difference between mathematical modeling and mathematical application problems. And I think the mathematical modeling process is characterized by defining a problem, making assumptions and identifying variables, creating and solving your model, but then instead of ending right there, you're analyzing your model, assessing it, and then you're trying to improve it through iteration, and then, of course, reporting out and implementing. And again, these are all these are derived from the Moody Mega Math Challenge. I know Mike Houston had a team last year. I had a team last year. If you do a Google search for the Moody Mega Math Challenge, it's a fantastic high school modeling problem. Your kids will like it. You can get 2 teams at your school. So anyway, I think that's all I have for slides, Mike. So I think I can turn this back over to you.
Thanks so much, Steve.
I'm handing you the ball, dude. Handing you the ball.
All right. I think Steve mentioned this already, but just in case, we are wrapping up, and as we're doing that, if you do have any last-minute questions for Steve or Johnny, please feel free to get those asked. I know they're going to try and get those answered. I do want to share some resources that are available, some of which are on our website, education.ti.com. And if you slide under the Professional Development tab in the middle, and then scroll down to Online Learning. Looks like there's a bit of a delay. I want to point out on the right-hand side, there are technology tutorials. And specifically because we have friends at Atomic Learning that have created these short videos to use TI-Nspire and TI-Nspire Navigator if that's something you're interested in. But if you scroll down, even on just this first page on the Atomic Learning site, choice C gives you a list and spreadsheet choice. And if you expand that, there's a few short videos that can help you remind how to do certain things or maybe learn a few new tricks that you might not have known before. So these are free. You can look at these as many times as you want. Again, check out the time length. They're all really nice and short, so they won't take up a lot of your time. So please feel free to check those out as well. Also available on our website under that Online Learning tab on the left-hand side is live webinars. And so you can check out next week's webinar titled Enhancing Students' Analytical Skills with the TI-84 Plus family. So maybe you're still using the TI-84 and you're loving it, and we hope that if you are, you'll join us next week and learn more about how to use the TI-84 in your classroom. You can also check out all the additional free webinars we have coming up this fall. All the registrations are open and they're all live. So please feel free to visit our website and check out the information. I'm pretty sure that Steve and Johnny are both going to be at the T-Cubed International Conference this year in Orlando. I know I'm going to be there, and I'm really excited to announce that the winner of the 2 free registrations tonight is Renee Hartofellis. So Renee, we'll be in touch in a couple days over email to give you a little more information, but Renee, congratulations. And Steve and Johnny, can you just give me, real quick, what's your favorite thing about the international conference each year?
For me, absolutely the real-world application, the most authentic use of technology as it supports good mathematical applications and pedagogy.
And Michael, the thing I enjoy the most is every time I go to the T-Cube conference, I learned something new about mathematics that I didn't know before. I learned something new about the technology that I didn't know before. And I always meet new and interesting people because the conference is not, it's just not too big. It's not like the NCTM conference, which is monstrous. It really is a good-sized conference, and everyone is so friendly and helpful.
Thanks so much. I agree. I've known and met a lot of great people at the international conference in years past. On our website, we have a promotion that's going to be ending at the end of the month, the I Love You TI contest, which allows you to enter to win a visit with Maya Bialik. So if that's something that interests you, please visit our website to learn more. As mentioned, we do have lots of upcoming webinars this fall. Please feel free again to visit our website to learn more. And I'm pretty sure earlier Steve and Johnny posted their Twitter handles, so if you want to mention them in a conversation about what you learned tonight or what you got excited about tonight, please feel free to do so. I know that there was a lot of stuff that was talked about tonight that really got people excited and juices flowing, so please feel free to use their Twitter handles and continue that conversation. To receive your certificate of attendance, go ahead and click that link in the chat window. It contains the name of tonight's event. Also listed is a link to those documents, which I know Steve and Johnny had promised everyone. So their PowerPoint and the TNS file are listed there and available for download. And just in case you miss it, don't worry about it. In a couple days, you'll automatically receive a follow-up email, which will have a link to the recording, a link to the certificates, and also a link for the documents as well. If you have some questions that were asked tonight and we just didn't have a chance to get them answered, we apologize, but please feel free to reach out to us, and we will make sure that we do get those questions answered. So if you're looking for some post-webinar follow-up, feel free to give us a call or send us an email. Steve and Johnny, thank you so much. I think this really gave me a fresh look on what modeling is. I thought I knew it, and you guys sort of made me look at modeling in a different way. So I know there was a lot of preparation that went into tonight's event, and thank you both so much for all the preparation that you did for tonight. I know I learned a lot. Thank you so very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
And we really hope to see everyone back online next week. Have a great night.